Everybody, this is Perch. I want to talk about something serious here for a moment. I was talking to a friend, and it's weird. I haven't met this person in person, but I still consider this person a friend. And I'm describing it that way. Anyway, by the way, the guy is going to listen to this and know exactly that I'm talking about him. And so the description may be a little weird. So I apologize if it's weird for you. But for the rest of us all listening, what the hell? Because this is a really important topic. And I think that to me, in comics and the success of the business and where things need to go, this is close to the top. Like if you were to give a top five things that need to happen, this is one of those five. And I haven't talked about it before specifically like this. So please pay attention. Is my point. You can do whatever you want, of course. And some of you, this may feel a little underwhelming because at no point in this video am I going to say like, "Stop being woke. You got to stop being woke, son." I'm not going to say anything like that. I do a terrible impression. Anyway, that's not what this is about. But this is key. So to give a little bit of background of how the comic industry works, and specifically how the publishers work, is that they will determine if a title gets renewed. And when I say renewed, that's kind of a bad word. That actually doesn't sum up what's going on. But if a title is going to keep going or not, based on its relative profit. And that's a good thing, by the way. That's how normal business works. You determine kind of your margin, you determine the cost of goods, you determine something called EBITDA. I'm not going to bore you all with explaining that word, but EBITDA, if you feel bored in your own personal time, you will go look that up in Google. It's what EIBDAH. I think I'm doing it. I'm like trying to spell while I'm trying to think of this. That's a mistake. Anyway, EBITDA is a pretty important term. If you haven't heard this term before in finance, this is an important term. It very, very loosely, it means your relative profit margin. Cost of goods versus profit, and the margin in between, along with some other calculations in there, make up EBITDA. So anyway, it's how a lot of companies are judged. If you are working, well, anywhere, it's a good idea to find out the EBITDA of the company you're working for and the, or the division or the department you're working on, because that's going to basically determine how long you're going to be employed. Anyway, key factor. This is a word that they should say in high school. They never do. Anyway, in most colleges, for that matter, you have to be in a business class to start to hear this term. Anyway, publishers look at this, and generally speaking, and I'm going to speak very generally, if you're in, Marvel and you have a title that gets an order for, so let's just keep the numbers really, really simple. This is not accurate, but it's close-ish. Let's say that a title's profit margin needs to hit 25,000 orders in order to be profitable. And in your mind, I want you to picture a red line. And basically, if you're above the red line, you're making a profit. And if you're below the red line, you're not making a profit. Okay? So, if you're above the red line, that means that you spent $20,000 to make a comic and you're making $20,010. Okay? So, that's not a great margin. A really good financial analyst would look at that and say you should make more than $10 for a comic. But beggars can't be choosers, so to speak. But generally, the closer you are to that red line, you're making a profit, but you're not making much of one. You start to wonder, like, if I took my money and I took it down to Vegas, I could probably make this margin just betting on just shit. So, we should make more of a profit than say $10 for a book. But anyway, if you're above the red line, you're cash flow positive. If you're below the red line, it means you're spending $20,000 and you're making $18,000. Let's say you're actually making less. Things that can push that limit. Well, let's say you got a comic and let's say it sells for 20,000 copies and you decided to hire Tom King and Art Adams on writing and art duties respectively. Well, Tom King and Art Adams are going to cost more money than say, Danny Lore and person you don't know from Argentina. Okay. There's a huge difference between those two factors. So anyway, often what happens in comics is that they will solicit the first issue and they'll put it out there and they'll throw a couple variant covers in there, or like maybe one variant cover, maybe 50 variant covers, who knows, to try and sweeten the pot a little bit to actually make this comic work. And so what they're hoping to do is the variant covers and the retailer incentives and all these other things will cause that number to spike up to 50, 60,000. Sorry there, the audio cut out. I said 50 or 60,000 copies sold is what they're hoping when they put a bunch of kind of variant covers and other things in the mix. Now, if you're Scott Snyder and you got, like 40 variant covers and it's Batman and everything else, your targets are probably like 100,000, 150,000. You're hoping to make that. So every comic that comes out, generally speaking, has a target. And while I wish that target was applied individually to different characters, it's usually more of a generic target. Like you need to make roughly this. Some editors don't think this way at all because they're not financially minded, but generally you've got like a low target, medium target, high target. Okay, so an example of that would be if you're selling a Dazzler book, you'll probably have a low target. If you're selling a Venom spinoff, it's a medium target. If you're selling Batman, it's a high target. Okay, all makes sense so far, hopefully. So here's one thing that dramatically has to change in comics, because I want to describe to you a scenario that goes on all the time, and I want you to think about it. So generally these orders come in. So you get final order cutoff date, the retailer gets some orders, here's what people have done. This is the number we want to pass along to the printer. Sometimes there's little games that get played at the printers, but generally speaking, it's going to say, well, retailer orders are 30,000. We had estimated 25,000. That's plus 5,000 copies. So that's not like a home run, but it's a solid single. Comic gets printed. But generally speaking, the comic publisher's not complete idiots, despite what you might read on Twitter or sometimes even here on this channel. And they know that the delta between issue number 1 and issue number 2 is going to be steep. So if the first issue comes in at 30,000, they're going to estimate that issue number 2 is going to be 20,000. Okay, so remember, if the break even is 25,000, what they're basically saying is, shit, 30,000 will get us a profit, but by issue number 2 will be under the red line, and so we should probably cancel this book relatively quickly. That's the way they think. So here's where the change needs to occur. And this is all about target setting and then where you put your value. Keep in mind the publishers, and in this case, I'm talking about Image, Marvel, DC, they have marketing dollars to spend. If you've ever played a board game, I mean, there's tons of board games where they do this, where you have money, and then you could spend your money on different kind of activities to like boost your army or raise the stats of your characters or gain territory. I don't know what kind of board game I'm describing here, but generally, you have a business or you have a goal, and then you have variable points or spend to enhance your goal. Okay? All fairly straightforward. Well, here's where it gets interesting. So the big publishers, Marvel, DC, Image, they have variable marketing spend. And here's what they do today, and then here's my suggestion of how they need to change. So what they do today is they say, hey, I've got a number 1 issue. Let's say it's Captain Marvel number 1. All right, put 20% of my marketing spend on that. I'm going to get some little posters. I'm going to put some ads in other Marvel comics. I'm going to, do a little bit of reach out to the retailers, maybe give them a email that's going to kind of describe what this is. I'm going to spend some of this marketing budget on some YouTube videos where somebody like talks about how amazing Captain Marvel is, and we maybe do an interview with the creative team. And all of this is meant to take the orders for Captain Marvel from, say, 40,000 to 50,000. You're looking at a return on investment, you're putting in marketing, and you're hoping to boost that number. And if you boost the number to 50,000, and then the delta between issue number 1 and 2 falls from 50,000 to 35,000, well, good news, you're still above that 25,000, you're making money and you keep going, right? And the other bit of, so that's how the business, in theory, works, how that marketing spend works. Now, one of the things that the comic retailers are not aligned on, meaning they do not agree with this analysis, but I'll tell you, I've run the math 8,000 different ways, and if you talk to any retailer, they will tell you the same. There's something called switching costs, and I understand I'm throwing a bunch of terms at you right now, but switching costs are basically where you issue a comic. Let's say that comic is Captain Marvel, And then you cancel Captain Marvel at issue 6, and you decide to reboot Captain Marvel to brand new number 1. And you're going to sink a bunch of money into getting variant covers and all the rest. You're putting that 20% of marketing spend into Captain Marvel. Okay, because your idea is here that the Captain Marvel you were putting out is sunk in sales and it's about to fall under the red line, so you're going to start losing money on it. So I'm going to reboot it, get Alex Ross and some other people to put some covers on there. I'm trying to get a juice another, with any luck, I'll get a 60,000 copy sale out of it. Instead of spending 25,000 to make it, I'm going to spend 35,000 to make it. So my spend went up, but I've done the right things to try and get it higher in sales, and this will all work out. That's, again, how they think. Now, here's the change that needs to be had. Is today, there is very little attention spent on titles that are close to the line. And titles that are close to the line are things that say, well, $25,000 is profitable. This title is coming in at $30,000, or let's say $26,000. And the change in mentality is, let's spend our marketing dollars on those books, the books that are close to the line, because if we could take it from, say, 26,000 orders to 35,000 orders, I boosted the line up. And if I boost that line up at the lower level, then I can stabilize at, say, 30,000, and I can go to issue number 50, and I won't have to deal with the switching costs of a lot of retailers, a lot of customers. When they do cancel and reboot a series, they will just not, they will stop. The pull list will stop. They won't actually go to the new issue. It's why, and you've seen it in the sales analysis videos I have on this channel, in the playlist, it's why every successive reboot tends to do a little worse. It's because people will jump onto a title like, I'm very excited about Captain Marvel, and then they cancel it and they reboot it. And 90% of the Captain Marvel audience will say, all right, I'm buying the new series. But 10% atrophies off. So every single time this happens, it gets a little lower. Now, this doesn't happen 100% of the time. Sometimes, comic companies say, all right, for this reboot, we're going to get a bigger name artist and a bigger name writer. We're putting R.B. Silva on this one. And we're putting a bigger name writer on it too. And so you will see sometimes when they reboot, sales go up. But general rule of thumb, and in this case, I am comfortable saying 95% of the time, when a title is rebooted, it sells a little worse than the time before. And that's because of the switching cost. It's because people just don't move with the book. They're like, I don't want to do this. So they don't go. It is far, far better. And there's infinite amount, well, not infinite, but you know what I mean. There's lots of comic sales history that suggests that if you just stick with a title, sometimes you switch out the creative team. You go from, John Byrne on Fantastic Four, you move over to Walt Simonson on Fantastic Four. That's better. That's a better route in order to make your money. Because, yes, sales go up and down, but generally speaking, most comics, if they're around for any length of time, will stabilize. The reason why a lot of your favorite comics get canceled is that they stabilize underneath the red line. And they stabilize underneath the red line because the marketing dollars, that auxiliary spend I was mentioning earlier, it doesn't go into those comics until it's too late. And I say until it's too late, it never goes to those comics. So basically, the marketing dollars and all of the ammo for the publishers goes toward getting that first issue and all those variant covers sold at 60,000, 70,000 copies. But where it needs to go is on issue 3 and 4 and 5, when the comic is dropped and it's in danger of continuing to drop or stabilize above the red line. But a lot of comics, the publishers have kind of given up on comics. They say, let's put all of our dollars on issue 1 at the beginning. Let's hope for a big push or an event or whatever it happens to be. Let's hope for a very big surge in issue number 1 sales, and then we'll ride the drop until it atrophies enough that we cancel it and start all over again. The challenge in all of this, as you can probably guess by now, if you're following along to this point, is that this is a no-sum game. This is racing to the bottom. It's putting a lot of dollars at the top for short-term money, but it's giving up on any kind of long-term money. And why this is important is comic books, by their very nature, are long-term money. They're periodicals designed to encourage subscription, designed to, have you follow from storyline to storyline to storyline, and you fail in that regard. And so I'll throw one thing out there. I've teased Steve Orlando plenty on this channel. The reality is, and I hate to break kayfabe on you here, but Steve Orlando is a nice guy. He definitely is. Like he's been sweet. And Steve Orlando did the Scarlet Witch for Marvel. And that comic went for a while. I don't know. He got the permission to use Darcy from the MCU, which in theory, somebody thought that would help. It doesn't help, but whatever. And then the title gets canceled. And then the next month, the title gets rebooted as Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, I think. And then a few months later, that gets canceled and gets rebooted as Scarlet Witch again. And why in the fuck would that happen? Because that makes no goddamn sense. Well, it makes sense if you think about everything I just said for the last, 10 minutes. It makes sense because all the marketing dollars are going to the number ones, and then they just ride the fall until they go under the red line, and then they do this again. The challenge in all this is if you think about the math, it means you're getting the profit from the number one, but you're spending more to get it. And then you're getting a little bit of profit from number 2 and number 3 and maybe number 4, but before by issue 5 or 6, you drop underneath the red line of sales and you start losing money. At that point, you probably cancel it and you do this whole thing all over again. But if you think about this, that means that you have, what they call in the finance world, a wedge of revenue. You're getting a wedge, which means it starts high and then like a triangle, it descends rapidly until you lose money. And this is basically something that's often used for short-term business, things where there isn't confidence in the product and they're just, getting money in the short term and ignoring the long term. But comics, by their nature, are built for the long term. That's where they're at their best. That's how Marvel and DC have survived as companies. If you think about the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, that's how they were able to live. If you look at the 90s and the crash, comics were only able to survive because collectors were coming in and buying issue 371 or whatever it happened to be, because the comic itself had stabilized. Even things like, Fantastic Four, a comic I love in my heart, it had dark days where, it had sunk to selling like 40,000 copies a month. Well, guess what? That's bad. Should sell much higher than that. But still, 40,000 copies are above the red line. And the only reason it is stabilized there is because you hadn't rebooted it or fucked with it. You just let it ride, and you'd put some marketing dollars in that. If you're old enough to remember the 80s and the 90s, once upon a time, publishers used to put marketing dollars into change of creative teams or big new storyline. They didn't just promote the first issue. That's not where we are today. Today, and you may be like, that's not true. Go look at the solicitations. Go look at what companies are promoting. The not just the vast amount, but for all intents and purposes, all of the money is going to number ones, is going to events, which are number ones. You can get all confused by it. It's like, well, that's an event. That's not a comic. Yeah, but an event still has an issue number one. And hell, you want a clear example of this? Go take a look at Blood Hunt. Okay, the vampire event Marvel did. Okay, Marvel promoted the shit out of Blood Hunt number 1. Compare that to the marketing Marvel did to Blood Hunt number 5. Spoilers, in Blood Hunt, Miles Morales becomes a vampire. At that point, he gets bitten and becomes a vampire. And then this lasted after Blood Hunt was over. Like he was dealing with his vampire shit. Look at the amount of promotion Marvel did in taking a character of theirs, which is popular, which had a movie that was highly popular in the Spider-Verse film. And how much marketing dollars and promotion did they give to a major? I mean, this is a character who is a younger kind of teen character, optimistic, all that other shit. And they turned him into a vampire, which is A major status quo change for a major Marvel character. How much promotion did they give that moment versus issue 1 of Bloodhunt? I'll tell you, it was not comparable. They spent almost $0 on that status quo change. The only real marketing they did of it was through the solicitation itself, which was no spend at all. If again, if you go back in time to the 90s and Wolverine gets his adamantium ripped out of him, a major status quo change. If you're alive to remember that, Marvel is promoting the shit out of that. Wolverine loses his metal. Wolverine is down to bone claws. It's like, this was a major deal that Marvel made sure you knew for like a year. They hammered that point. That's Miles Morales turning into a vampire. Now you might say, like, nobody gives a shit about Miles Morales. No, actually, people do. That movie was successful. And regardless of whether you like Miles or not, that should have been something that Marvel promoted the shit out of. But that's how the marketing dollars are not going to help titles that are... they're not going to help titles stabilize, and they're not going to help titles stay above the line. You would think that if there was a comic like, say, the X-Men, or Wolverine, or the Fantastic Four, or Spider-Man, or Batman, or Green Lantern, and that title was like people are looking at the numbers like, oh shit, man, Green Lantern selling 30,000 copies, starting to get close to that 25,000 number. Let's put some marketing dollars, see if we can get that puppy back up to 35,000, because if we can do that, at least it will stabilize at that number, and then we can figure out ways to bring it up. But let's get it. Let's stop the fall. They don't do this. That, again, this is a lot of inside baseball, but I'll tell you, that is fucking the top 5 things that comics are absolutely shit terrible at, and that is leading to their demise. Anyway. All right, I was very passionate. Thanks for listening. No, I'm kidding. I won't end it that way, but close. I don't have much more to say. Look, this is a big deal. This is a big business deal. This is what mature business people do. I understand that, and please, for the love of all Christ, and some of you may want to tease, please don't. I understand this is not as sexy as saying, yeah, but you got a Mexican gay lady in there. Like, that's the problem. Gay Mexican lady. I understand it's way more spicy for YouTube, but I'm telling you, from a business perspective, this is easily one of the biggest culprits to why comics are fucked. And if you're a comic creator and for some reason you stumbled onto this, despite Reddit telling you that Perch is a terrible asshole, but you listened anyway, this is the magic key. This is the unlock. I promise you. This is really critical information. If you can tackle this, if you can unlock this, brother, you're golden. Thanks for listening. For real this time.